This is a melodic bass drop that sounds like a beginner made it. It's flat, boring, and honestly just kind of weak overall. The idea is actually there, but the sounds and the mixing decisions are just ruining the vibe of this drop. Now, full honesty, I made this drop myself on purpose, and I baked in all of the most common mistakes that I see beginner and intermediate producers make. I've spent the last 12 years producing melodic bass. I've released on Ophelia, Heaven Sent, Seeking Blue, Enhanced. I've done official remixes for Seven Lions, Elenium, Jason Ross, Tritonal, and every week inside of my academy, I give detailed feedback to producers to help them go from intermediate to fully advanced professional quality. So in the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to take this drop and turn it into something that actually sounds professional. So let's dive in and I'll show you what I mean. Section 1. First, let's listen and actually call out what's wrong. All right, so before I fix anything, let's play this drop one more time and I'm going to point out to you all of the issues that I'm actually noticing. So there's about 3 big things that I'm hearing, and those are the things that we're gonna fix. The drums are weak and quiet, there's no punch. The saws and leads are thin and cluttered, and there's honestly just way too much going on there. And finally, the bass. You can barely feel it, and in this genre, the bass is everything. So none of that means the idea itself is bad. What it means is the sounds and the mix are simply wrong. So let's fix all 3 of these things, starting with the first that makes the biggest difference, the drums. So if you listen to these drums, the kick has no weight, the snare has no power or snap, the whole thing is really quiet and honestly just weak. Now, this is where most producers go wrong. They hear those drums and they think, okay, what type of processing can I add to these drums? How much compression do I need? How much saturation should I put on here? What's the missing link to make these drums sound better? The problem is that's completely the wrong way of thinking about this. The main thing you need to do 9 times out of 10 when you have weak drums is just pick different samples and turn them up in volume. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do here is replace these drums with samples that are made by producers who actually work in this genre. One of my favorite packs is the Chime Ace Aura Melodic Rhythm sample pack. You can find that on Splice. So now if we listen to these drums, and let's turn them up a little bit further. Typically what I like to go for in my drums is I want my kick to be hitting around -12 and I want my snare to be hitting around -18 on a Spectrum and Ableton. So we'll turn this kick up a couple more decibels. There we go. So now listen to the before and after of these drums. Right, these are quiet, weak, even if I turn them up to the appropriate volume. When you compare them to these other drum samples, it's absolutely night and day. The other thing that I'm going to add real quick that the beginner drop doesn't have is some percussion in between the kick and the snare. So now if you listen to what that sounds like with that, this percussion adds a ton of energy, top end, and movement to the drums that just didn't exist in the beginner level drop. So it's the same pattern, same everything, just different samples. I didn't even touch a single plugin. Fix number 2, the saws and the leads. So the saws play a super important role in this drop. They can either make it sound super powerful and wide, or they can just make it sound like a mushy mixture of mid-range frequencies that are super ringy and messy. So let's listen to our saws and see what's actually going on here. Two of the big issues I have with these saws are they're way too high of an octave and they're all basically just kind of doing the same thing. They all sound very similar, and this is a super common thing that I see producers doing. So what I'm going to do instead is replace these layers with a couple of different type of sounds, and then I'm going to change the octave as well. This third layer we just don't really need now. And so now, instead of these saws, we have these saws. So with our drums, sweet. So that's definitely moving in the right direction. The thing that makes these saws different than the other saws is, for one, they're both very distinct. They're very different from one another. So this top layer, it's very wide and very detuned. I'm adding stereo width here up to 217 to make it super wide, and I'm taking out the mono low end so that it becomes even wider. This other layer, it's very kind of mono, actually. It's very centered because it's mostly based around a single oscillator sub here with a slightly detuned saw on top of that. Again, nothing processing going on, just some EQing really, and then some saturation to make it kind of gritty. And then I took out all of the low end and top end in the sides, which again kind of pushed it more into the mono. So this saw is basically sitting in the center. It's got grit and texture. The other saw, it's sitting way out in the sides. It's super detuned. And so if you listen to them together, so they're both doing very distinctly different jobs, and they're very low octave, which makes them warm and powerful. So next up, let's check out these leads. So these leads have a very similar problem to the saws. They kind of sound like they were randomly chosen, and oftentimes when I hear the leads in a beginner or an intermediate drop, it actually sounds like the same thing. It kind of sounds like they were just chosen at random. The couple of fixes that we need for these leads is, again, lower octaves wherever possible, and each lead really needs to be serving a specific purpose, and it needs to be powerful kind of on its own. So let's grab a few new lead layers, and I'll kind of show you the before and after of how they should sound. So one place I constantly find myself going for leads is the Remnant EXE presets. These are really sick, and you can get them on his Gumroad. This is a great one. I'm gonna take away a little bit of this excess low end. I'm going to increase the reverb. Let's listen to that with our saws. Turn this up about 7 more decibels. Nice. So even just one lead is already sounding better than what we had before. So next up for this other lead, I'm going to add in a piano. I like to do this a lot in my drops. I like to add a different type of lead layer so it adds some texture, so it's not just like Serum presets. And let's see how that sounds right off the bat. Pretty nice. I want to make that a little brighter. Let's see how that sounds with the saws. All right, so let's grab one more lead. I want to grab something that's a little bit more upfront, something that's a little bit more present and kind of bright. This one here. And how's that sound with these three now? Nice. So do you notice that one's a lot more upfront and present? And the reason for that is that it doesn't really have any reverb on it. It does have a little bit of delay, but it's being fed pretty heavily into this distortion unit, which is just really crunching that into a bigger kind of grittier signal. But for the most part, the construction of this sound is quite simple. It's just detuned saws, but it's being done in a way where it's a lot more dry and kind of upfront in the mix. So let's get rid of this last lead. We just don't need this. And now let's compare our new leads to our old leads. So do you notice the difference before and after and how powerful those new leads are? It wasn't really about processing. It was more just about choosing the right sounds, lowering the octaves, and sort of choosing sounds that fit together and each serve their own specific purpose, right? So this first lead, it's pretty reverby, it's very hyper detuned, and it's really far away, so it just takes up a ton of space and makes the mix feel huge. The piano, it's got some reverb on it, and it also just has a different texture, right? So it's not just another Serum preset, it feels different than the Serum preset. It adds a little bit of an organic feeling to the mix, and again, it's got a lot of reverb on it, so it feels kind of far away. This final sound, this is the one that's the hero lead, if you will. It's kind of the main sound, it's up front, it's in your face, it's kind of bright, it's present, it's powerful, and it really brings the rest of those leads together. So if you listen to all three of these leads without that one, and so now this is how our drop is sounding currently. Versus before. Now, before we get into the bass, I know this is a lot to keep track of on your own song. So I actually put together a free melodic bass checklist that you can go and download from the description below. It's a free PDF that outlines all of the common mistakes that I see and how to fix them. Again, it's linked in the description below, no strings attached, totally free, just go download that. Now let's go finish off with the bass. So fix number 3 is the bass. This is where the listener is gonna feel it in their chest. If they're listening in a car, if they're listening on a big sound system, the mid bass and the sub bass specifically are what's gonna give this drop a ton of power. And so let's listen to this sub and figure out what's actually wrong with it. So the first thing is it's playing too high of an octave. Right now the frequencies are spiking as high as about 95 hertz on the low end here, when in reality it should be sitting between about 30 and 70 hertz, give or take. And then that lowest note gets a little bit too low, so I'm going to bring that up an octave. Now, the other thing is that this sub, it's just simply too harmonically rich. There's just too much going on. And you can see that it has this harmonic here, which is almost as loud as the actual sub itself. And that's a big mistake that I see producers making. So let's swap out this preset, because this is the thing that I see a lot of, is people will just choose sub bass presets kind of at random and just call it good. The preset that I always use is one that I actually made. It's basically just a sine wave with some custom harmonics drawn in. And then from there, what I'll do is add a saturator to it. And that's going to add a little bit of extra harmonic information. There we go. And then if I add this saturator to it, give it about 3 dB. There we go. I'm going to turn it down 1 decibel because we want it to be about the -12 range that the kick is sitting at. Great. So now we have our sub. We're going to move it over to the new drop. Fix the sidechain so it's sidechained to the new snare. Let's listen to that with our drums. Nice. So final thing here is the mid bass. Let's check out what we have currently. So the issue here really is that you can't even really hear this mid bass in the mix, because for one, it's filtered way down. There's really no high end on it. For two, it's playing a really high octave way up in the mix. And then the other problem is that it's super detuned. So it's just sort of spread evenly amongst the voicing and the stereo width of the chords. And it just kind of mixes in there. Like if I listen to the older drop, you know, you can hear it in there, but it's making just a little bit of a difference. It's not very powerful. So let me add some new mid bass layers to our new stack over here. So I'm going to duplicate this. We're going to have 2 of them. First, I'm going to go in and I'm going to choose the Awakened Academy preset, The Last Heroes, wide mid bass. Nice. I'm going to take a little bit of sub bass off of it. And then I'm going to turn this into a mid-side EQ, and I'm actually going to cut all the low end from the mono, and then I'm going to low cut the sides at about 80, just so there's no sub in the sides. But I'm just going to take away basically all the low end in the mono, because this is going to be our mono mid bass down below. Again, those lower octaves get a little bit too low. So So we're gonna add that, go up an octave on that last note, on that third note. And you notice how low some of these frequencies go. Right, we want this low end to go all the way down to about 80 hertz, 70 hertz. That's kind of the sweet spot for mid bass. And so next up, this is gonna be our final mid bass, just 2 of them, and I'm just gonna go for a new serum on this one. We're just gonna have a single sawtooth here. I'm gonna go down an octave, add some noise. And then I'm gonna give it some distortion. So you have that sort of grittiness to it, and then I'm gonna take off the sub. Give it a little bit of multi-band compression. Perfect. So how does that mix in with our other mid bass? I'm just going to take a little bit of the high end off of this mid bass here. And so now if we listen to this drop stack with and without the mid basses, so this is with versus without. Big difference, right? And so again, let's just real quick listen to the drop stack before versus after. And so the big thing here to notice is the mid basses are now far more present. Similar to the saws, again, we have a wide layer and a mono layer, and they have a lot more grit and high end and texture, which makes them a lot more powerful in the mix. It's a huge part of that super saw stack. So let's hear the whole thing. This is the drop that I started with. And this is after. And remember, this is the same drop, same chords, same melody, same everything else. We just swapped out some sounds, did a little bit of mixing, and this is the end result. Same track, same MIDI, same pattern, same everything. Basically, all we really did was just pick better sounds and mix them to an appropriate volume. So I hope you found this video helpful. The purpose of this video was to illustrate that oftentimes the main things really separating a novice track from a fully professional track are a lot simpler than people think. So if you want to know what to focus on and in what order to build that foundation from scratch, I made a full video on how I would learn melodic bass production today if I had to start over from scratch. It just popped up on this end screen. Go check it out and I'll see you guys there.